everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of We're in Between, the podcast where we discuss about every single episode of As Told by Ginger once a week. Last time we gave you our season 1 recap, discussing about our opinions of our favorite episodes, and now today we're going to be discussing about the very first episode of season 2, which is called Never Can Say Goodbye. It was written by Emily Kapnick. It aired on February 11th, 2002. And the episode is about that, yes, finally, as hinted at before when Ashli and I interviewed Ken, Darren gets his headgear removed and becomes instantly popular overnight. Ginger thinks that she may have feelings for him, but she isn't the only one. Darren and Miranda actually start dating with one another, which was kind of sort of hinted at in the previous episode we talked about, Summer of Camp Caprice. And in the meantime, we have Brandon's pet monkey, Mr. Licorice, goes out missing, and Carl and Hoodsey are being hired by Brandon to do an investigation on where he may have went.
Yeah, I feel like I remembered that the headgear eventually wasn't there. Like, I had memories of seeing him without headgear in episodes. So I felt like this was coming at some point. I didn't realize it came quite as soon as it did. But, you know, I think it's an exciting sort of character change for him.
Totally. Yeah, I already have so many thoughts and feelings on just your reading of the intro. But before that, as always, we're in between, and take a listen to our brand new Season 2 intro.
Someone once told me the grass is much greener.
A lot of people are watching along with us.
Things are going to be taken a lot further.
It does keep the flow really, really nicely, which makes it a show that was really ahead of its time.
Where's that petrified eyeball at now? Who's had it last?
Macy is amazing, and she doesn't care about what other people think about her.
Don't you feel like maybe Dodie represents the instinctive animal, ugly part of us?
I might have just been having a bad day when I gave it the meh.
At Camp Caprice, we don't say mooses, we say meese.
Someone once told me the grass is much greener on the other side.
Okay, so the episode begins with Darren visiting his orthodontist for the last time, with him stating that today is going to be the start of a new day, the first day for the rest of his life. And it turns out to be the day where he gets his headgear removed. And it's a very clever way that we don't actually get to see his face when the headgear is removed. And every girl is saying like, ooh, looking good, Patterson. And then finally we see Darren climbing up to Ginger's window and saying surprise, and Ginger's not really paying attention until finally when Darren says, if you actually notice me, maybe you'll actually notice me. And then when she looks at him, she says that he's became totally hot.
I think this scene is really well done. The whole build-up, and then to the classic, Darren shows up at her window, which to me is why I predicted that they will ultimately end up together. That's not a spoiler because I don't know. It may be true, but they have these really cute scenes where he climbs up to her window and he's just there in her windowsill, and so they replicate that again, but he's got the headgear off. I just thought it was such smart writing, and the way they visually tell that story is fantastic.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. You kind of know what's happening, right? Like, obviously he's at the orthodontist, and you know that he's gotten his headgear off, but you kind of have this anticipation of, like, well, what's he going to look like now? Like, it's hard to even picture the character without his headgear. You get so used to seeing him, with it. It's like his staple thing, and, sort of the way, and, as the episode progresses, we kind of see how, even though at this point things are still the same and he's still dropping by the window, how things get a little messy there in the middle.
Yeah, definitely. And, throughout the episode, Darren is shocked that all the girls are now all of a sudden really interested with him. But before we get into that scene, we have to cut back into when Ginger explains to Dodie and Macy about how she feels about how good-looking that Darren has become. And I even like the example that Dodie left about how Darren is like a caterpillar, and that he formed himself a cocoon and became a beautiful butterfly. And then I also, another callback that was even mentioned about how the last time that Ginger tried to have a relationship with Darren, it pretty much was over even before it started, which is calling back to Dare I Darren.
Yeah, for sure. I might be jumping ahead here, but I'm going to explode if I don't say it earlier. I hate the concept of Darren and Miranda. I thought they were a great one-off thing for the season 1 finale. I thought that made sense. But I thought, okay, we're going to see them be a couple just to watch how much it fails immediately. And it totally doesn't, and I'm terrified of how long this is gonna last.
Doesn't it, though?
Yeah, it pretty much is over by the end of the episode.
Oh, am I crazy? I thought they hinted it more later on in the next couple episodes.
Now, don't you worry, Casey. It's pretty much over in this episode. I already hinted at when we discussed about Summer of Camp Caprice, in which they did kind of hinted at that maybe they would have a relationship with one another, and they even did mention that when Courtney and Miranda were in the bathroom, and Miranda was saying about, oh my gosh, is it just me, or did he turn like a total hottie overnight? And then Courtney was like, well, maybe you guys, should try to hook up with one another because you had such chemistry in, last summer over at the military camp.
That's true, and they do set it up. Their fight that they have in this episode is awesome. I thought it was an incredibly nuanced scene, and, they're having, a real adult fight. It's pretty intense. I guess it does ultimately end the relationship. I don't know why I thought that it was still floating around later.
No, that's okay. I mean, like I said before in the previous episode, this is one of the things from Summer of Camp Caprice that doesn't last very long. Oh, and speaking of which, I guess we can cut it over to the Carl and Hoodsey plot. So, we see Brandon over by the trash can crying, and he's muttering yeah, who's a good boy? You are, yes you are. And Carl and Hoodsey are thinking oh man, is Mr. Licorice dead? And so then they approach Brandon with Carl saying, we couldn't help but overhear you crying, Brandon, but is your monkey dead? And then he says, no, he went completely missing. And then even Hoodsey brings up, again from Summer of Camp Caprice, saying, Carl can help you out. He was the one who, got the dog napper arrested last summer. So there you go. That's actually the solution to the dog kidnapper from the previous episode.
Yeah, a little sad that it's not quite as big of a, we don't get to see her get caught and get her just results there, but at least we know deep in our hearts that she was, caught in the end.
Yeah.
There are some amazing quotes in the Carl Hoodsey Brandon plot of this episode. I'm obsessed with, Carl goes, is your monkey, dead? Just so deadpan. And then later he tells Hoodsey that he's blubbering like a whale. And Hoodsey goes, whales don't actually blubber, Carl. They have blubber. And what a fantastic line. And, obviously evoked the likeness of Doug Dimmadome, which I'm sure, was probably after this episode. But you can't think of blubber without blubber nuggets.
This is true.
Blubber nuggets. They're chewy.
They are chewy. And then, the last quote I wanted to say. They're spying on Brandon. They have a security camera system set up already in Brandon's room, right?
All over the house except for the bathroom.
Right. So yeah, Carl and Hoodsey don't set it up. It's just a part of Brandon's house. And they see him saying his prayers before he goes to bed, and it's actually a really heartwarming scene, as much as we all have different opinions on Brandon. And the Carl's like, okay, skip ahead, and Brandon is sitting there with them, and he goes, no, you'll miss the part where I bless you and Hoodsey. just so tender. What a moment.
Yeah, it's one of his more likable moments. He's a lot to handle. This is skipping ahead quite a bit, but there's a great line that happens later where Brandon's like, without the monkey, I'm just an annoying little boy. And I was like, yes indeed.
At least he's self-aware.
Yes.
Anyway, so I know we're going all over the place, so let's see if we can get back on track. So Ginger is really concerned about Darren getting all the popularity from the girls because not being with Ginger, Dodie, and Macy over at the lunch table, they're not speaking to one another, and so she watches Dr. Fawn Feelings, which is a talk show host who says, give him the cold shoulder. That way he can be able to know that you mean business, and then he'll eventually come back to you. It's okay, that's not exactly what I would have thought of, but she decides to take her advice and she basically ignores Darren. And then Miranda pretty much takes this as an advantage point with her going over to Darren and trying to make him, the girlfriend. And so they start having this relationship with one another. Darren goes over to Miranda's house and hears her play the clarinet. And then they start having their argument about how he's not allowed to see Ginger because Miranda doesn't like Ginger, and that she's making a lot of sacrifices by not seeing Courtney. So they have this little bit of a tense disagreement with their friends.
I have seen this in real life, even in, adult-ish, I guess, college-aged relationships. This problem definitely happens. I know of a lot of people who don't like their significant others to hang out with people of the same gender, right? Or of opposite gender, rather. I've had friends who are like, oh, you can't hang out with him, you can't hang out with her. These things definitely happen. And definitely, too, just the balance, the life relationship balance is always really difficult of how much time you spend with one person versus another, and I felt the realness of that moment.
Totally. Since I'm the derailment guy, another thought just popped in my head that Ashli and I hadn't really noticed until this watch through. I must have known at some point, but Grey Delisle is Brandon? Oh my god, that's amazing.
Yeah, the range of her voice, honestly.
Yeah, that blew my mind. And you totally hear it, but I thought it was more different than most of her other characters, so I didn't really notice it, because we don't hear Brandon talk that much until this episode. It's crazy.
Yeah, Brandon was sort of like a character who we've seen on and off throughout the first season. We've seen him in various episodes whenever he talks about Mr. Licorice, or the episode where Carl and Hoodsey are competing on Glockenspiel, or when Brandon wants to meet up with Santa Claus. But yeah, in this episode we do get to see a little bit more on Brandon and his relationship with Mr. Licorice, and how he's just so over smothering Mr. Licorice that he just ends up being the one who runs away. I don't blame him for kind of being really heartbroken, because from what we've seen in class and one another, he doesn't seem to have a lot of friends, or maybe even no friends at all. And there will be another episode about that very same subject. But with Mr. Licorice, it's that's his best friend in the world, and the fact that he's gone is just absolutely heartbreaking to him. Even when he finds out that Mr. Licorice did run away in the security cameras, he just basically is devastated. He gives Carl and Hoodsey the money that he promised if they were able to locate Mr. Licorice. And I even love when Hoodsey, he wasn't even satisfied with the reward when they're going out to get milkshakes, because he just felt like it was just not satisfied that they were not able to find Mr. Licorice. But then Mr. Licorice does end up in a pet store, and Mr. Licorice is so frightened that because he already knows who Carl and Hoodsey is, that means he has to go back home to Brandon. And the fact that that's going to happen to him, he just absolutely refuses.
I think it's a pretty humanizing episode for Brandon. You can't not feel bad for him in this episode, right?
Yeah, I agree. You kind of feel for the monkey, too, not wanting to be as smothered as he is, but you do feel for him, Like Patricia said, it doesn't really seem like he has a lot of friends, and him sort of losing his only friend has gotta be hard. As much as he is annoying a lot of the times, he does have that self-awareness moment, too, so definitely do feel bad for him throughout.
Yeah, definitely. Alright, so we have Ginger really accepting to him because she's just sick and tired of not being friends with Darren, but at the same time, she feels kind of overwhelmingly jealous. And then Darren explains to her, I'm sorry that I was away from you for so long because, I didn't know that this popularity would overwhelm me, especially with me and Miranda having a relationship with one another. And then Miranda comes up to Darren right away, brings him over to the phone booth and said, it's not working for us. I'm missing out on so many things. I miss Courtney. So I'm afraid we're going to have to cut off the relationship. And then he even, says that, you weren't a pretty bad girlfriend, Shmoo, which was the nickname that Darren calling her, which is, to be kind of fair, I've always been mixed with pet names. Some pet names are nice, but then there are some others that really scratch my head, and that's definitely one of them. And then we have Miranda going back to Courtney, and they're being friends again, and they're catching up with so much things, And, we see Miranda and Courtney being really happy. And then we see Ginger and Darren being really happy with them catching up with one another. And I guess the episode concludes with Carl and Hoodsey go back over to Brandon's place after they purchase Mr. Licorice with the leftover money that they got from Brandon as their reward for trying to find the pet monkey. And they said, you have to do some major changes. Let his cage be dirty every once in a while. Remove that stupid tie. It's embarrassing. It's dumb. And Brandon says, okay, I'm willing to change a little bit. And then immediately, right away, he pulls out his comb to Mr. Licorice and says, hey, I'm just going to comb off a little bit. And we see Mr. Licorice, struggling. Basically, Brandon hadn't learned a single thing. And then we have Carl and Hoodsey walking together outside. And it's a pretty nice moment. And that's pretty much how the episode ends.
Yeah. Can't forget the line where he goes, I had to get the monkey back because without the monkey, I'm just an annoying little boy. And then Carl says, and with the monkey? And Brandon says, I'm an annoying little boy with a monkey. That's something.
The monkey is what defines him, which, to be fair, is pretty much true. That the monkey makes him something. I don't think I have any more thoughts about anything. Anyone else have something to add?
Well, as previously mentioned when we had Ken over, this is his personal favorite episode, and we also have the ending song in which he actually got to sing the wrong song. And unfortunately, at that interview, he wasn't able to remember it. But yeah, it's actually pretty cool that Ken actually sung the ending credits to the song. And yeah, it's actually a pretty nice song.
Oh yeah, I forgot that was in this one. Yeah, I thought it was a fun little add-on there.
All right, I guess we can end this discussion on this episode, giving our ranking of yay, nay, or meh. So, yeah, what are your guys' thoughts on this one?
I think it's a yay. I liked all the plots, even though I didn't love Darren and Miranda as a couple, but they figure out the same thing I did of they're terrible and they need to stop. So, because of that, and because of all the great quotable lines from Carl, Hoodsey, and Brandon, this one gets a yay from me.
Yeah, I'm gonna hop on board with that one as well. Not the strongest yay, but it's a yay. I think, like I said, I think it's an interesting sort of character change for Darren to be getting his headgear off, and we get to kind of see, those sort of big personality changes that do happen in real life and how that affects friendships and dealing with relationships in a way that I think is real. The side plot wasn't my absolute favorite thing, but definitely I liked the humanizing of Brandon that we saw, so overall I'll give it a yay.
I'll have to give it a slight yay as well. I do like that we do get to see a massive change happening to one of the major characters, especially since this was the very first episode of the second season. There had to be some interesting things to carry over from the first season onward. And, there are some little moments that do hint on from the first season, like callbacks from Darren and Summer of Camp Caprice. I do like the fact that we see Darren in a brand new perspective. And also, I do enjoy the Carl and Hoodsey side plot, especially with, developing Brandon's character a little bit more, who he started off as, really, really annoying and kind of like a show-off, but we do see that he has a more humanized side, and I also like the quotes of the episode. Yeah, I'm not too crazy about Darren and Miranda being together, but thankfully, this is just a one-off thing, and I'm not going to hint at anything, but let's just say this won't be the last time that Darren will have a relationship with somebody. I'm not going to say who, but it's actually a really nice starting point. So yeah, I'm going to give it a slight yay as well.
Well, thanks so much, you guys, for listening, and we'll see you next week on We're in Between.
I know I said back then, never wanted to see you again, but I was wrong. Baby, I was wrong. 9 times out of 10, it seems to happen that I'm wrong. Baby, I'm wrong. Each day that passes, I can't, although I try. Each day hits me